I see a world war of never-before-seen extension and intensity. If the system of mutual outbidding and armament carried to the extreme finally bears its natural fruits, 8 to 10 million soldiers will slaughter each other and strip Europe bare as no swarm of locusts has ever done before. The devastations of the 30 Years' War condensed in 3 or 4 years and spread all over the continent. Famine, epidemics, general barbarization of armies and masses provoked by sheer desperation, utter chaos in our trade industry and commerce, ending in general bankruptcy, collapse of the old states and their traditional wisdom in such a way that the crowns roll in the gutter by the dozens and there will be nobody to pick them up. Frederick Engels. Hello, my name is Bob Umanita. Since the inception of the wheel, our species, fascinated in understanding and mastering the universe around us, have pooled our collective creativity, curiosity, and industry to develop increasingly advanced technology to achieve those ends. While a majority of our technological achievements have been used for the betterment of humankind, like humans, our innovations also have a dark side. This video will explore the technological leap in weaponry from the period of the Napoleonic Wars to the outbreak of World War I, with a focus on the advancement of field artillery, namely the German field gun, the 42-centimeter Gamma Mörser, while also highlighting a world not yet ready for the devastating technology that a modern war would unleash. The use of siege warfare dates back to ancient times, the earliest example being the battering ram, used by the Greeks, Romans, and most notably the Spartans, who incorporated the use of a siege tower to protect the battering ram and its technicians. As fortifications became more advanced, so did the technology employed to break those fortifications. Catapult, ballistae, trebuchets were used against fortified cities and castles during the Middle Ages. It wasn't until post-Renaissance Europe that we see a widespread use of gunpowder-propelled ballistics. Cannons were commonplace on the battlefield, both on land and at sea, from the 15th through the 18th century. Most famous was the 12-pounder Napoleon, used in the American Civil War and by Napoleon Bonaparte to conquer most of Europe in the early 1800s. For the time, the 12-pounder Napoleon offered advanced accuracy and the ability to destroy enemy fortifications accurately at a distance of just over a mile. The 12-pounder could also fire various types of shells, not just cannonballs, but also canisters and spherical case shells. Between the time of Napoleon and World War I, Europe saw a time of relative peace, but during this time, mankind continued to advance both socially and technologically. More people were becoming educated, electricity and the Industrial Revolution were coming into play. During this time of peace, a type of fort was developed to counter the effectiveness of the 12-pounder Napoleon. These forts were built into hillsides. They were largely underground. Some had guns that would come up from out of the earth and fire at oncoming attackers. The most important thing to note about these forts is that they effectively rendered the 12-pounder Napoleon cannon inert. Now, the Germans believed that a war with France was inevitable at some point in this time between the Napoleonic Wars and World War I. And since France had an ally with Russia, Germany needed to have a plan to be able to defeat both France and Russia if a war were declared. The German war plan, known as the Schlieffen Plan, was developed for conditions for Germany to win a two-front war against France and Russia. Since France had built an impressive series of forts along its shared border with Germany, The Schlieffen Plan called for a violation of Belgian territory and the use of their road system in order to invade and defeat France before the Russians would be able to mobilize their forces. Though the Germans expected the Belgians to cooperate, things like relinquishing their forts to the Germans and not blowing up bridges so Germans could get along and go invade France were expected. But when the Germans arrived in Belgium, they found that the bridges had been blown up and that the Belgians would be resisting. With the Belgians resisting, the Germans needed to gain access to the Belgian road system, but the main road systems were protected by a series of Belgian forts. At the time, the forts were guaranteed to the Belgian government to be invulnerable to any cannon then known in the world. The German war planners knew that the Belgians might resist, and they knew if they did resist, they needed to have a weapon that was more powerful than anything the designers who built the forts had ever envisioned. Unbeknownst to the rest of Europe, Germany possessed a new weapon designed to raise these forts. The Napoleon Cannon L-16, or the 42-centimeter Gamma Mörser, was indeed a monster. Weighing in at close to 300,000 pounds, the gun had to be broken down into 10 smaller pieces and pulled via horse-drawn carriages to be transported. Before the gun could be set up to fire, a cement foundation had to be laid and cured, which could take up to a week. The Napoleonic cannon, the Napoleon 12-pounder, could fire a 9 to 12-pound shell about 1.2 miles. The 42-centimeter Gamma Mörser could fire a 2,000-pound shell more than 8.5 miles and was more accurate than the 12-pounder Napoleon. This would be like launching a Volkswagen Beetle from Boston Common and accurately hitting something the size of a house 8.5 miles away. Soldiers would have to fire the gun from 300 yards away, yes, that's 3 football fields away, with cotton wads in their ears and their mouths open so their eardrums wouldn't be blown out. The Gamma Mörser could fire various shells, including armor-piercing and delayed fuse rounds. Shots would be fired at an arc into the air, come down on the roof of a fort, penetrate the armor, and then, after penetration, explode. So why is this cannon important? Well, I think it's important to look back on this cannon because for its time, it was completely unexpected. In the time between wars, Germany had developed a technology that the world had not seen before, truly devastating technology, which really no one was prepared for. The Belgians thought that their forts, were going to be able to hold up. They thought they were going against Napoleon 12-pound cannons. But they were completely wrong, completely surprised, and Germany, steamrolled them. Steamrolled right through Belgium into France, and, the rest is history, as they say. The lesson that I take away from this is if those people back then can be surprised by the devastating violence that new technology can cause, what's to stop someone today from being completely surprised by the same thing with things like the NSA wiretapping of civilians? I think that we're only starting to see the tip of the iceberg as far as what is possible in terms of technology to be used against us, against our fellow man. And I think it's up to us to be vigilant and do all that we can to avoid any future conflicts and try and ratchet back the advancement of technology that is used to kill. Thanks for taking the time to watch my video today, and maybe I'll make some more. Who knows?